I want you to meet a couple of very special guests. Because to observe this anniversary, I'm going to bring you over the weeks ahead those people who make your day, the morning men and women of the metro area. And great pleasure to introduce as our first guests in the special series, Pete and Geets, CFNY's hilarious morning team. How long has it been a team? Who's the spokesman?
Pete's the spokesman.
Pete's the spokesman.
Well, first of all, Pete, let me bore you with the fact that I'm about to celebrate my 38th anniversary in this business. Time flies. Fancy meeting you here, because we've worked together many years ago.
Well, that was the very beginning.
Yes.
We should tell that story.
Yeah, you should.
It was late 1940s. The place was Haydu, which is your hometown. And you came in one day and you wanted a job, and I don't think you really knew what you wanted. And we took you on. What did you do back then?
As I recall, you had a talent contest, and the program, I Can Hear It Now, Walter Cronkite's old show, I stole a few ideas and did a recreation of Champlain arriving in and
it's coming back now. Right.
And I think I rigged the mail. I've been doing that ever since, you know, for ballots, and I managed to win a job which resulted in weekend work at the station.
Yeah, but I know, I can recall some very hilarious incidents back then. I know that this taste for whimsy, for off-the-wall humor was there right at the very beginning. Did anybody inspire you back then? Was it a Groucho Marx thing, or Bob and Ray, or something like that?
I guess some of the early radio people were a big inspiration. Steve Allen, even back then, when he was just starting, was, and of course later got involved in television. But do you remember the time that you were reading a commercial for one of our sponsors, and the product itself was, as I remember, it was called the National Double Action Milking Machine.
Oh, yes, I recall to this day. Canadian Tire was the sponsor.
Right.
I was doing this very soberly, the National Double Action Milking Machine. And through the paper-thin walls came this moo of a contented cow. And that was the end for me.
That was the end for me, too. You got fired, eh? I think by resignation, well, it's time to move on.
I recall also for years afterwards, I used to get this Christmas card from some far point on the map, and all it had on it was moo.
The memory lingers.
You had a lot of experience after that. You went to quite a number of stations.
Right. Now, this is a limited time that we have here, so I don't want to go through
Maybe
the
we'll
list.
cover the ones you didn't work at.
Right. No, I worked mostly in Canada, but I spent about 5 or 6 years in the U.S. Working radio and a bit of television.
Straight radio or your brand of radio?
Well, gee, I always thought that was what radio was for, so I guess it's my brand of radio.
Right. What do you think constitutes a Peter Griffin?
Bent.
Right.
Peter Goddard recently expressed something in a critique he did of our show, and he said that even when I was at Chum FM during the classical period, which later became the underground rock period, I always sounded like I didn't fit in. I never will and never have.
Unconventional.
I guess so. I don't know.
Standing back and taking this ironic view of the world, then you hooked up at some point with David Haydu, alias Geets.
Yeah.
I got to ask David how you get Geets out of David Haydu, because I get asked all the time how I get Pete out of James. It's not easy.
Well, I heard it on an album, the name Geets Romo. There was an album put out, I guess it was in the 50s, on how to speak hip with Geets Romo. And I said, hey, what a great name. So I started to use it. And I've been using it ever since. And the funny thing is, once I had a call from a guy who was the original Geets Romo on the album. He phoned me and said, hey, you're using my name. And I figured, oh boy, here comes a lawsuit. But he said, you got more mileage out of it than I ever did. I just did this one stupid album, and that's how I started using it.
Was there a character about Geets?
No, just it's really David Haydu. It's just, you know, I just picked the name.
What made it click? How did
Well,
you
actually,
find
the
out that
name-
you've got something?
Peter, the name that came first on the air was Beans Rontash, who was the engineer.
But I don't drive a train, I tell you.
And it happened one afternoon when I was working at Chum FM. Geets or Beans Rontash came in and lifted up the
Console.
the whole console upside
Well,
down while I'm on the air. And I figured, well, if he's going to do that, I might as well take a bit of his time, too, and interview him.
And so right away I talk like this in the Hungarian accent because Rontash is a Hungarian dinner, you know. It's a type of bean goulash.
And Beans became a star instantly there, and later did most of the traffic reporting.
Yeah, yeah.
Beans Rontash.
Then you began on a regular basis, and you had to have these characters in place.
We started adding them, right?
Yeah.
You started adding them. What were some of the others, and how did you get the inspiration for them?
Well, I guess, and we have been accused of this, of being a stereotype, but as I've always said, it is FM stereotype radio, so that's what they were there for. But we had McTavish,
It's right.
very thrifty and stereotyped.
That started at Chum FM because
right.
the person who was in charge of the financial situation at the station was Scottish. And so I just fashioned it right after him. You know, that's where we started.
Did he resent it?
Not at all. No.
Big Red was obviously inspired by Red Fisher. Watching those shows,
I love those shows.
we aged him a bit and made him a little more rustic.
You know.
I have to confess that at that point in my career, I worked with Red Fisher quite a bit.
Really?
He had a home down at the end of Mitchell's Bay on Lake St. Clair, and was a regular contributor to CFCO when I was down there. So we saw Red every week, and the thing you have to say about Red is he's consistent. He's the same off the air as he is on the air. What does that tell us?
Sounds like you, Pete.
Well, the audience was very responsive right from the beginning.
Yes.
Right.
Management had a problem because they weren't sure what was going on. They just
That
heard
sounds familiar.
a street talk, and they were curious, and every once in a while they dropped back and listened. Now, it became a bit of a problem because Geets or Beans or whatever, as well as being a character on the program, was still in engineering. And Geets has a long background in radio engineering, so at one point in the program, we were in the middle of some bit, and somebody the door was always open, and we always left it open because the air conditioning systems
never worked.
never worked at any radio
right.
stations. Somebody stuck their head in and looked over at Geets and said, "David, we've got a problem over in AM with the transmitter," and so we just rolled with it on the air.
Said, "Be right back." I said, "I'll be right back." I got up and I went and fixed the problem, and Pete just, talked a little bit, and then I came back and finished the problem up.
In time, I guess your listeners expect that sort of unexpected, unrehearsed item, and also look for your response to it. Now, it's a morning show, and mornings are not the time when people generally are at their best mentally. How do you get over that? Are you at your best in the morning?
I think so.
Yeah.
I think we're fresher.
What time do you get up?
5 to 6.
Who's listening? Management, I think.
We arrive at the station at 2 for preparation. That's for the management.
Yes. The first script rehearsal is at 4 o'clock.
It's all ad-lib.
When do you pick your topics? When do you decide?
Usually we
Correct.
peruse newspapers and
Right.
various periodicals.
You don't know how most of these sketches are going to finish when you start, I gather.
That's sometimes quite obvious. We have a great producer in that he knows if we're in trouble, and he can get us out of there with production aids or music or whatever.
Is there an ideal length of...
Not really, no. Sometimes I don't even know what Peter's going to be talking to, whether he's going to be talking to Beans or to McTavish or Lardette, the female character I do. I just never know, because we don't even discuss that.
No, this is an unorthodox way of doing it, but Geets is right. The record has 30 seconds left in it, and I see something, or I may change something around, but at the last minute, I'll fire a question, and Geets will respond in whatever character he chooses sometimes.
Do you see yourself enlarging the cast?
I have been enlarging for a few years now, but I'm trying to do something about that.
Well, we have added other characters since then, and different approaches. We make fun of ourselves, the audience, and the whole idea of radio to a great extent. There's so many contests nowadays that we do things like the radio fish pond, where people pay 25 cents to fish in a pond for tickets. I mean, we have so much stuff to give away. We try to invent new ways to do it.
Satire, generally speaking, is missing from the airwaves everywhere. Not even on the American networks anymore. There used to be that great period with Bob and Ray.
Right.
Oh, they were terrific.
Delightful characterizations they did.
Ollie Ballou here.
Ollie Ballou. And as you mentioned, Mr. Allen before that, Arthur Godfrey, way back when, did a good deal of this sort of thing. Have you thoughts about Sirius radio? If all this ended tomorrow, what kind of radio would you like to do, Pete?
Gee, well, I'm from the old school. Classical music I've done. I've done just about every conceivable format with music. I was a great fan of the old stage series on the CBC. I always thought that the CBC had probably the best radio drama in the world.
Unquestionably.
I always thought it'd be fun to act on radio. It's a challenge.
Which like the Arch Obler kind of thing.
Of course.
You know.
Right. And we did have a lot of that in Canada. You know, the stage series, and Al Savage had a fantastic series too, and private radio back a few years ago. Which brings me to this. You were actors in a film which I saw. I'm not sure whether it's sort of the Canadian equivalent of Plan 9 from outer space.
Listen.
Is it arguably the worst film ever made in Canada?
Oh, there are some moments in this film which bring it a couple of levels up. I think there are worse films in this.
I was going to say the parts you fellas are in bring the level up.
Well, that's why that film is so bad. If we're the best thing in it.
That's why it's bad. See, we were planning on building nice houses in
You'd already
California.
got real estate in Malibu, right?
Yeah, we had the real estate and everything, and then boom, that ended our career in movies.
We ought to give the name of this film. You know,
Listen to the City.
Listen to the City. Right.
It's around on pay television.
Yes, forever.
And Pete and I made big bucks in it too. $50 a piece.
We had a lot of fun doing the film.
You earned every. Were they as sincere as they appear to be, the filmmakers? It had
they were
an
dedicated.
awfully
Very, very
earnest feel
dedicated.
about it.
You know, they were very dedicated. Everybody in it was really dedicated.
I couldn't make head nor tail of the script initially.
That was the
Then
problem.
they changed the script.
Even when we were doing it, you know, nobody in their right mind says, "Alas, but."
At City Hall, they don't.
I couldn't remember the lines at all in that. You know, and I would come in and I'd look at Peter, and there'd be this big turkey sitting on the table. And I'd look at him and I'd just start to laugh. You know?
And they ran that.
12,000 takes, I think it was.
And ready for the next great venture. Well, it's quite obvious from what you've heard and seen of our guests on this edition that they enjoy what they're doing, and they project that sense of enjoyment and warmth and wit
Do we give them the $5
to everybody.
now?
We get the $5 now. Pete Griffin and David Haydu, the team of Pete and Geets, heard daily on CFNY, and it's been a great pleasure to revive some memories with them and to get this slice of life philosophy from them. Thank you for dropping by.
Thank you. Is it
Nice
time
to
for us
meet-
to go?
Nice to meet my old boss again.
Yeah.
Right, and not be nervous about it. Well, that's it for this week. Next week, we'll introduce you to another of the morning stars of Toronto.